I just seen a video that had a psychiatric expert talking about how the only real emotion that men are really permitted to display and relatively socially accepted in any capacity to put on display was anger. But I can't help but disagree with that. It makes me curious and makes the gears start grinding. What really grinds my gear about that is, what demographic are you necessarily referring to when you say, when you come to that conclusion? What case studies and examples are you referencing to come to that conclusion? Because while it can ring true, a comment like that, how the only really justified and credible emotion that men are permitted and allowed to display is anger, because when we cry, you get disregarded or undermined in your value and your ability and your capacity and your competence to be capable. That when you show other emotions, like you feel happy and giddy, that you might be seen as gullible. But to say that the only one we're really permitted to display is anger sounds wrong to me. And more than it sounds wrong, it feels extremely inaccurate. But because I don't know everything, and it's plenty possible that he is right and I, per usual, am wrong, it begs the question of that rebuttal, where if I was there with him and I got this opportunity to ask, what his first intuitive response might be, well, if you think and feel I'm so inaccurate, what do you think it is? I'm so glad you asked, Mr. Doctoral Expert. I would say that men aren't necessarily permitted or encouraged through outcomes to display any emotion, period. No but, no exemplary thing to replace your anger theory. It's just no emotion, period. The only thing that's ever widely given any credibility and recognition is the nonchalant attitude, that stoic attitude of no emotion as a whole. The only emotion and forms of expression, rather, would be indifference for men. Men aren't socially permitted to have emotions. They're socially encouraged to be indifferent. Now, I can't speak on other cultures and other races because ain't named Bennett, because I ain't been in it. I can't speak from the perspective of a white man, although I can refer to what I know of my whiter variety friends, and I can speak on my personal experiences and what I have come to understand and know and have been told of my Hispanic amigos and amigas. But personally, socially, out in public, yes, everything but anger is generally okay as a child, as a boy. growing up. Anger is one of those, come on, simmer down, it's whatever. While all the other emotions tend to be, okay, you're a bit too happy, okay, you're a bit too much, you're a bit too excited, you're a bit too shocked, you're a bit too surprised, you're a bit too. Where after, not everyone is patient, let alone children. So to be told that from adults, if your innate patience meter, if your fuse for patience and being told the same thing over and over again isn't doused in water, when people keep lighting it up and when adults tell you, no, that's enough, that's too much, you're a clown, you're the class clown, you're the one we will make martyr like examples of. Most children, most boys especially, learn no emotion then. I'm gonna be indifferent. I'd rather get in trouble for being indifferent than for showing emotion and being too excited. Because me being excited takes energy out of it. This doesn't cost me any energy, and I can see everything for how it really is. Like, you don't want me to be happy, you don't want me to be mad, and I'm still in trouble if I show you nothing. So had at thee. So I'd say socially out in public, it is very much emotionless, nonchalant, and stoicism that is encouraged. As a boy growing and trying to develop into a man, and I'd say personally in my community, in the communities I'm in, that I would say most of my community that I know of and got to understand and experience are rather encouraged to discourage the emotion of anger, the very one that the doctoral psychiatric expert was saying that we are encouraged all throughout. I'd say, sure, you have a basis for outside of homes, but in home, the main thing that gets done is that the indoctrination that anger is something that you rather fear more often than not. You fear the consequences of your anger. Most religions push you against going to anger. So God forbid you're a religious person or you are raised up in a religious household. Most households, once you get home, try to instill fear about anger, what you could do in your anger, what other people could do to you in your anger. So this aspect that anger is the only encouragement, emotion encouraged to men and boys of the male variety, is also extremely personally inaccurate, because as boys you are indoctrinated to fear the consequences of anger and wrath, and as men growing up you recognize there's is potential there is pros and cons to it, but ultimately it's majority negative, so it's not something anyone should generally ever be in support of. So this conceptual idea where the only emotion men tend to be encouraged by is anger, because fellow men tend to hype each other up and use anger and particular aggression as motivators to push them for progress. Like, say, in a gym, getting a workout in. If you're mad about something, put all that mental strain and energy and stress out on the machine. Turn yourself into a machine. And while that again, sounds true. It's just not legitimately accurate because words have meanings and the way you use them, especially in the English language, determines a whole lot and can spread misconceptions about it. Where personally, again, I would say most men are raised up as well as indoctrinated at all age ranges in order to fear anger and the consequences of anger from all sides and all aspects, to such a degree that no matter what it is, anger is extremely unacceptable. But seeing how all emotions are rather taboo, what is promoted, and the only thing that is promoted is indifference, which is quite the lack thereof emotion, and to be thus more nonchalant, more stoic, and with your stoicism, and in order to be considered pinnacle man, you have to be able to read the room and read circumstances and situations as to understand which emotion you should be embodying. Where that may not sound right, but hear me, fellow man. Think of it as you're not allowed to feel anger, but you have to come across as imposing. In certain scenarios, you might not be permitted to facially express how happy and giddy you are, but you have to use body language in order to give off that certain aura that the stars are aligned and people around you can feel this happiness and giddiness and this delightful thing when in your presence, even if your voice is monotone or you tend to just happen to be looking regular and normal. It's more so about whether or not you embody it. And it's not the same for women. Women, from the day you're born, are permitted to just be you, extremely encouraged to figure out you in all the facets because you will be loved regardless. And anyone who doesn't love you regardless, for you just being you, was not meant for you, screw them. Preferably not literally. That is 2025. Screw them literally if you so choose to, I guess. But it's not a funny haha. It's a bit of a funny thing, weird. It's weird, but it's forgot to pause it. It's just funny, weird how things work out that way. To the point where doctors and psychiatric PhD professionals are going online and going on podcasts and taking interviews to discuss how men as a whole in general, without actually giving the full look around the discussion and topic, where as a debater and a comprehender myself, I would address the fact that yes, he and part of his discussion and conversation is fine, especially when it's talking about socially and in public and minor micro society level. Yes, you can make the argument that all the emotions are thrown under the bus and that anger is the only general accepted emotion. Yeah, you can make that argument. It sounds true. It rings true. But It's not actually true, though. And because it's not actually true all the way around, that's where using debating lingo, I should say, that your argument and your perspective and your side of this discussion and debate turns into an argumentation of fallacies and in what may not even be intentional misleading evidence in order to justify the take that you're trying to share with the world, which is that we need to come to a better understanding of the emotions we're feeling so that we can channel all of them in the proper, competent ways that we are plenty capable of doing so that we can bring men and women together at a better and higher rates like we once used to, allegedly. But again, it's not actually about that. If you are online more often than me, and I'm hardly ever online like that, let alone TikTok or Instagrams and stuff, if you have ever spent any time in social media in the modern day, you'd understand that a lot of the girls, the material girls, are talking about the auras, the vibes, the feelings. So, no, it's very much not about the emotion anymore, as much as it's, again, promotion of the way feelings matter more than the actual words of expression, and just you being able to express without words, because most women tend to talk in circles trying to be politically and semantically correct more often than just being straightforward and direct in an acceptable manner. So I may have said a thing or two out of full comprehension. I understand that. It's just something that was on my mind because of the 8-minute video I was watching. That pretty much 30-second clip and excerpt from the discussion really drew my attention because it really grinded my gears, and I couldn't continue playing the video because I had to talk out this introspection and trying to work out his argument. But there were just so many loopholes and holes in his argument from the way he was discussing and talking about it that it just took away his credibility to me. So, yeah, that's just me. But by golly, I do very much hate the fact of how deeply I get technical with things sometimes, because it's stuff like this that makes it hard for me to appreciate some people's content and videos and perspective, because this or that technicality and the terminologies some people be using, especially when they get adamant and specific and passionate about what they're talking about. It's like, I understand you feel very strongly about this, but I feel very strongly that if you were talking to me, you would want to stop talking to me because of how many holes I'd poke in your book, in your little narrative story here. I'd feel very self-conscious about how bad you might feel after talking to me without me ever getting mad at you. I'd feel bad that you'd be mad at me just for pointing out a few flaws in your argument when I really just wanted you to clarify and verify the thing so we could talk about how to further strengthen your discussion. Because what I did here, while yes, I was poking holes in his argument and giving further examples and discussion, perspective on the discussion, I also was inherently giving him other things to consider to further his conversation and perfect his spearhead to that conversation and discussion, where his spearhead was very generic, and so generic, in fact, that it is incredibly inaccurate for a vast majority of the demographic he was referring to, men. And by thus taking it more so to that further level, or even just articulating that he was referring to explicitly socially, but not in home dynamics, it would further strengthen his argument to be more factually definitive and correct and credible, but without being more specific or expounding it to be more encompassing. His whole argument is like sand on a rainy day. It was very loose, and thus it just grinded my gears as I ground up this entire discussion in my mind. But hey, that's just me, and I'm starting to ramble, and I feel like my voice itself is a bit deeper than usual because I'm not putting on the mask of being more excited than I naturally am. So my voice is coming across a bit more rugged with bass, the regular amount of bass in it, and I don't like it. I don't like it. It makes me feel like I'm my actual age instead of younger, like people say I look. But yeah, that's just me. Till next time.